The renovation crew had been at Mountain View Animal Clinic for 2 days, upgrading the old facilities, when an unexpected discovery turned their ordinary workday into a chilling nightmare. It was September 20th, 2024. Jake Peterson, 41, a seasoned contractor with nearly 2 decades of experience in Montana, had been carefully removing old drywall in the surgery area, expecting the usual dust, outdated wiring, maybe a forgotten tool or two. But what he found made his blood run cold. Behind the wall, completely hidden, was a small storage space that wasn't on any blueprint. As Jake pried the last panel away, his flashlight revealed something he could never have prepared for: a human skeleton. Still wearing a veterinary coat, a stethoscope draped eerily across the bones of the neck, the body lay on the cold concrete floor as if frozen mid-motion. Scattered around it were patient files, yellowed with age, and a black medical bag. It didn't take long for Jake to realize the gravity of what he had uncovered. Within hours, DNA testing would confirm the truth Riverside had feared for 15 years. They had finally found Dr. Sarah Williams, the beloved veterinarian who vanished without a trace on the night of March 15th, 2009. Her clinic had been left in pristine order that night. Surgical instruments were neatly arranged on the stainless steel tables. Patient files were open on the computer, lights still on as if she had only stepped out for a moment. But the reality was far more horrifying. Sarah had been brutally murdered and hidden behind a wall by someone she trusted implicitly, someone whose desperation and debts had turned him into a monster. For 15 long years, patients had been treated, surgeries performed, and animals cared for in rooms just feet away from her secret resting place, completely unaware that their doctor's life had been stolen, and her body hidden just beyond reach. Jake's hands trembled as he stepped back. He called out to Tom, his crew member of 3 years whose face mirrored his own shock. "Call the police. Don't touch anything. Just call them right now." Within 20 minutes, the Riverside Sheriff's Department arrived. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing, followed by Detective Sarah Chen's unmarked vehicle. Chen, 44, with 19 years of experience in law enforcement, had a deep understanding of small Montana communities like Riverside. She knew everyone knew each other, and any crime here carried a weight far beyond the evidence. It touched the hearts and trust of the entire town. The forensic team moved meticulously. Every angle was photographed, every measurement carefully taken, and every surface swabbed for trace evidence. The skeleton's position was chilling. Leaning upright against the back wall, it bore clear signs of blunt force trauma to the skull, multiple distinct impacts that spoke of rage and violence. The remnants of a white veterinary coat clung to the bones, a name tag barely readable, jeans and worn sneakers still on the feet, and a wristwatch frozen at 11:45 p.m., marking the hour of her death, or when her body was sealed away. Detective Chen knelt beside the remains, her voice quiet. "Veterinarian," she said, almost to herself. "Worked here, we need to understand everything about this clinic, everyone who was ever involved. Someone knew what happened here." The investigation turned to the clinic's records. Founded in 2005 by Sarah Williams, the Mountain View Animal Clinic had served Riverside faithfully for nearly 2 decades. Among the files, one case immediately stood out. Sarah Williams, 34 at the time, missing since March 15, 2009. Chen carefully opened the dusty case file, revealing the meticulous notes of Sheriff Robert Hayes, now retired at 67 and living in Billings. "Sarah Williams," Hayes said slowly when Chen called. "That case haunted me for years. She was remarkable, loved by everyone. Then she just vanished. We searched everything. Lakes, fields, abandoned buildings, nothing, no trace." Chen asked if there were any suspicious people around at the time. Hayes's voice tightened. Her business partner, Michael Patterson, took over the clinic after she disappeared, seemed genuinely upset at the time. No red flags, really. DNA testing began immediately. Margaret Williams, 73, Sarah's mother, provided a reference sample. A week later, the results were undeniable. The skeleton was Sarah Williams. Sarah Elizabeth Williams was born in Montana on June 8, 1975. As an only child, she grew up on her father's small ranch in Riverside, developing a natural gift for understanding and caring for animals. By age 12, she had treated her first broken-legged dog successfully. Her high school success earned her admission to Colorado State University Veterinary School, from which she graduated with distinction in 1999. She worked for several years in Denver before returning to Riverside in 2005, determined to serve her hometown. At 30, Sarah opened Mountain View Animal Clinic. She poured herself into her work, often treating animals for free or at reduced cost, organizing vaccination clinics for low-income families, and rescuing injured livestock and pets. In the community, she was more than a veterinarian. She was a symbol of trust, compassion, and dedication. In 2007, she became engaged to David Cooper, a local high school biology teacher. Together, they bought a small house, adopted two rescue dogs named Max and Bella, and planned to marry in the summer of 2010. But darkness was already closing in. Michael Patterson, born in 1971, had joined the clinic in 2007 as a veterinary assistant and had quickly earned Sarah's trust. By 2008, he became a business partner, gaining 30% ownership. He appeared hardworking and committed, but privately he was drowning in a severe gambling addiction. By early 2009, Patterson owed over $80,000 to casinos and loan sharks, and the pressure was relentless. Michael saw only one way out. The clinic's insurance policy carried a $200,000 death benefit. If Sarah disappeared or died, he would inherit her share and receive the payout, enough to pay off his debts. Desperation warped his mind into a chilling, unthinkable plan. March 15, 2009, Sunday evening. Sarah stayed late finishing paperwork and post-surgery notes. Michael was supposedly cleaning. A call came, an emergency from Farmer Johnson claiming a critically ill horse. Sarah grabbed her emergency bag, prepared to leave immediately. "Can you check the storage area first?" Michael asked casually. "I think there might be a leak." Sarah, always helpful and trusting, followed him to the dimly lit back storage area, unaware of the danger that awaited her. Michael's hands shook, the plan running through his mind. Then, with a heavy metal rod, he struck her from behind. The impact was sudden and brutal. Shocked, Sarah fell to the concrete floor, confusion on her face. Michael panicked. Another strike, and another. When she finally stopped moving, he stepped back, the horror of what he had done sinking in. Sarah Williams, the woman who trusted him completely, was dead. But he wasn't finished. Driven by fear, desperation, and greed, Michael dragged her body into the unused alcove at the back of the clinic, walled off from sight. He positioned her upright against the wall, then methodically built a complete drywall barrier, sealing her away permanently. Hours passed as he worked, cleaning every trace of blood, organizing patient files, wiping the rod clean until the space looked as if nothing had ever happened. By dawn, the clinic appeared untouched, the perfect crime masked in the ordinary bustle of everyday life. Michael even cleaned Sarah's office meticulously, leaving her computer on, files open, coffee half drunk on the desk. It was as if she had stepped out for just a moment. He left and tried to sleep, though Sarah's face haunted him. That next morning, David Cooper arrived, concerned. Sarah's car was in the parking lot, her purse and phone still in her office, but she was nowhere to be found. Calls to Farmer Johnson revealed the call never happened. Weeks of searching and volunteer efforts found nothing. Michael took over the clinic, presenting himself as a grieving partner determined to continue Sarah's work. He collected the insurance payout, paid off his debts, and ran the clinic successfully for 15 years. All the while, Sarah's photograph hung on the wall as a constant reminder of the crime he had committed. It wasn't until Jake Peterson's renovation crew struck through the old wall in September 2024 that the truth finally came to light. Detective Chen worked closely with genetic genealogy expert Dr. Lisa Park, who used advanced DNA analysis to trace the crime back to Michael Patterson. The evidence was overwhelming, finally linking the skeletal remains to him directly. On October 15, 2024, Detective Chen arrived at Michael's door with deputies. "Mr. Patterson, you are under arrest for the murder of Sarah Williams," she said calmly. Michael nodded, the weight of 15 years crushing him. He confessed fully at the station, tears streaming down his face as he recounted every moment, from the fake emergency call to the brutal attack, from hiding the body to claiming the insurance money and running the clinic in her name. The town of Riverside was stunned. Margaret Williams spoke at a press conference, voice trembling. "My daughter trusted him completely. He murdered her and built his life on her death." The trial began in December 2024. Michael Patterson was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The Mountain View Animal Clinic was renamed in Sarah's honor. A bronze plaque was installed, memorializing her dedication and compassion. Justice had finally been served, though the scars left on the community and on her family would never fade. Detective Chen summed it up in interviews. "Sometimes the people we trust most are capable of the darkest betrayals, but with persistence, truth can never stay buried forever." The arrest of Michael Patterson on October 15, 2024, sent shockwaves through Riverside. For 15 years, he had walked the halls of Mountain View Animal Clinic as if nothing had happened, a trusted and competent veterinarian. He had smiled at clients, comforted grieving pet owners, and even shared Sarah's name with the community as if it were his own shield of legitimacy. Now, standing in his modest home, flanked by deputies, the weight of his decades-long deception finally caught up to him. His hands trembled as he stepped aside, letting Detective Sarah Chen handcuff him with practiced precision. Inside the vehicle on the way to the station, Michael was silent at first, staring out the window at the familiar streets he had walked for years, the homes he had driven past, oblivious neighbors still unaware that the monster living among them had been revealed. Then, in a broken whisper, he said, "I knew this day would come eventually. I didn't know how I'd face it." Chen didn't answer. There was no comfort in words for what he had done. At the station, Michael requested an attorney, but the moment he saw the skeletal evidence photographs and the DNA reports, a transformation occurred. The bravado he had carried for 15 years evaporated. He confessed fully, each word spilling out like the release of a decades-old poison. He described every horrifying detail of that night. The false emergency call from Farmer Johnson, luring Sarah into the back storage, the panic-driven strikes of the metal rod, and the calculated hours spent dragging her body into the alcove and building the wall that had concealed her for 15 long years. "I didn't plan to kill her," Michael said, his voice shaking. I was desperate. The gambling debts, the threats, I thought if she disappeared I could survive. I didn't know it would cost her everything. Her life, her future, and my soul." Chen listened, her expression unwavering. She had heard confessions before, but rarely with such chilling detail, where the cold pragmatism of greed collided so tragically with the sanctity of trust. The truth was complete. There was no room for doubt. Michael had not only murdered Sarah, he had built his entire 15-year career on her death, her reputation, and the very trust of the community she had nurtured. Meanwhile, Riverside was in shock. News of the arrest spread quickly, igniting a storm of emotions. Friends, neighbors, and former clients of the clinic were stunned. How could someone so trusted have lived alongside them for so long, hiding a secret so monstrous? Margaret Williams, Sarah's mother, struggled to contain the torrent of emotions as she faced the media. "For 15 years, she said, her voice trembling, I brought my dogs to him. I thanked him for continuing Sarah's work. I trusted him. And he killed my daughter. How could anyone live with themselves like that?" David Cooper, Sarah's fiancé, could barely breathe. He had spent 15 years in hope and grief, trying to understand her disappearance, holding on to the belief that somehow she might return. Now that hope was shattered, replaced by an overwhelming sense of betrayal. He walked past the clinic, the place where so many of their plans had been made, the building where Sarah had cared for countless animals, and felt the darkness of Michael Patterson's deception pressing against every wall. The investigation didn't end with the arrest. Detective Chen and Dr. Lisa Park, the genetic genealogy expert, meticulously pieced together the timeline of Michael's life after the murder. Every trace DNA sample, every item moved, every piece of evidence left behind in the sealed alcove told a story of premeditation, deception, and calculated survival. Park's work was crucial. Even the tiniest biological traces, skin cells on a patient file, residue on the stethoscope, fragments of hair caught on the veterinary coat, were linked directly to Michael Patterson, proving beyond any doubt that he had handled Sarah's body and sealed it within that tiny hidden space. As the weeks progressed, the community watched as the story unfolded. Riverside had always been small, everyone knew everyone, and the betrayal ran deep. Michael had been a figure of trust, a caretaker of animals, someone the townspeople had relied upon for over a decade. To learn that this same man had killed the woman who had built the clinic, nurtured its reputation, and served the community's animals with unmatched dedication was almost too much to comprehend. Preparations for the trial began immediately. The courtroom became a place where years of grief and shock converged. Michael's defense tried to argue that his actions were a product of desperation, of gambling-induced panic, a moment of weakness driven by uncontrollable circumstances. But the prosecution painted a clear and uncompromising picture. Michael Patterson had planned, executed, and covered up a murder for personal gain. The careful construction of the wall, the thorough cleaning, the exploitation of the insurance policy, and 15 years of maintaining the clinic under Sarah's name all pointed to cold, calculated premeditation. During pre-trial hearings, Margaret Williams was present every day, her eyes scanning the courtroom, watching the man who had stolen her daughter's life. She held back tears but radiated a quiet, unwavering determination. David Cooper, too, attended, sitting with other family members and friends who had never stopped hopping for justice, even if they had long since stopped hopping to find Sarah alive. The weight of 15 years of unanswered questions hung over the proceedings, turning every word spoken in court into a release of decades-long tension. Inside the courtroom, Michael Patterson remained mostly silent, occasionally lowering his gaze to the floor. When witnesses recounted their memories, describing Sarah's dedication, her kindness, and the trust she had earned in the community, his composure began to crack. Each testimony was a reminder not only of what he had taken from them, but also of the respect and love he had destroyed. Forensic experts described in painstaking detail the reconstruction of that night in 2009, the trajectory of the blunt force trauma, and the careful concealment of the body. DNA analysts explained how modern genetic genealogy allowed the team to trace the crime directly to him, solving a mystery that had gone cold for 15 years. The jurors were captivated, unable to escape the enormity of the betrayal and the meticulous nature of the crime. Throughout the trial, the townspeople of Riverside showed up in large numbers. They filled the gallery, silent but present, their collective presence a testament to the impact Sarah had on their lives. Every client who had ever entrusted their pets to her care, every neighbor who had known her warmth, every friend who had experienced her generosity, felt the weight of Michael Patterson's deception firsthand. The courtroom was not just a venue for justice. It was a stage where the town confronted the darkest side of someone they had trusted completely. Michael's confession during the trial was chillingly detailed. He recounted the fake emergency call, the assault in the storage room, the hours spent dragging Sarah's body into the alcove, and the methodical construction of the wall that hid her from the world for 15 years. "I thought I could survive," he said quietly, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know it would cost her life. I didn't know it would destroy me inside too." But even in his confession, There was no real remorse for the act itself, only regret for being caught. His words, while revealing the entire chain of events, did little to lessen the horror. The jurors were left to weigh the reality of someone living a double life for 15 years, maintaining a facade while the woman who trusted him was entombed within the very walls of the clinic he ran. When the jury finally deliberated, the decision was swift. Guilty of first-degree murder. 15 years of deceit, planning, and destruction could not be ignored, and Michael Patterson would pay the consequences. The sentence was life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 25 years, a date that would find him an elderly man at 78 if he ever reached it. Outside the courtroom, the community struggled to reconcile the events. Margaret Williams addressed the gathered media. "Michael built his life on my daughter's death. Every single day, he lied to me, to David, to this community. For 15 years, I brought my dogs to him for treatment, thanked him, trusted him, and he killed her. He deserves every day of his punishment." David Cooper, holding Margaret's hand, said quietly, "We lost her once, but now at least we know the truth. We can finally honor her memory and continue the work she loved so much." Mountain View Animal Clinic was officially renamed Dr. Sarah Williams Memorial Animal Clinic. A bronze plaque was installed, bearing her name, her birth and death years, and a dedication to a veterinarian who had served animals and her community with unmatched compassion. All profits Michael had gained from the insurance payout were seized and distributed to animal welfare charities in her name. Detective Chen gave a statement to the media, her voice steady but grave. "The person you trust most can sometimes be the one who betrays you the deepest. But with dedication, science, and persistence, justice will eventually prevail." Sarah Williams's story is a reminder that truth cannot stay buried forever. Even as the trial concluded, the echoes of the crime lingered. Riverside began to heal slowly, but the community never forgot the betrayal or the dedication of the woman who had devoted her life to caring for others. Every rescued dog, every treated horse, every grateful pet owner was a living tribute to her legacy, a proof that despite the darkness, compassion could endure. And while Michael Patterson would spend the rest of his life living with the enormity of his actions, Sarah Williams's legacy lived on, shining brightly through the continued care and love for every animal that entered the doors of the clinic she had founded. The courtroom was silent as the final week of the trial began. 15 years of unanswered questions, grief, and betrayal were coming to a head. Michael Patterson sat in the defendant's chair, a shadow of the confident man who had run Mountain View Animal Clinic for over a decade. His eyes were hollow, shoulders slumped under the weight of the truth he had confessed to, and every witness that entered seemed to chip away at the facade he had maintained for so long. Detective Sarah Chen sat in the front row, reviewing her notes one last time. The forensic evidence, the DNA analysis, and the genetic genealogy reports had left no room for doubt. Dr. Lisa Park's work had been meticulous, ensuring that every trace of biological material found in the sealed storage room was matched conclusively to Michael Patterson. The jury would see not just the confession, but a detailed, scientific reconstruction of 15 years of deception. The first witnesses called were former staff members and longtime clients of the clinic. Each recounted Sarah Williams's unwavering dedication, her compassion for every animal, and the trust she had built with the community. "She treated our pets as if they were her own," one woman testified, tears in her eyes. "Even when we couldn't afford it, she never turned us away. She was more than a veterinarian, she was part of our lives." As the stories unfolded, Michael's face remained impassive, but inside, guilt and fear were gnawing at him relentlessly. For 15 years, he had walked past her photograph in the clinic waiting room, smiled at clients, and pretended to grieve, all while hiding the horrific secret of her death. The courtroom echoed with the betrayal, and the jurors felt it in every word of the testimonies. Next came the forensic experts. They detailed the timeline of March 15, 2009, describing how Michael had lured Sarah to the back storage room under the pretense of an emergency check. They explained the sequence of blunt force trauma inflicted with the heavy metal rod, and how Sarah's body was methodically moved and sealed behind the newly constructed wall. Photographs of the skeletal remains, the stethoscope draped around her neck, and the carefully preserved forensic evidence left no doubt that Michael Patterson had committed first-degree murder. Dr. Lisa Park then presented the genetic genealogy analysis, showing how DNA from Sarah's remains matched Michael's genetic profile. The scientific diagrams, the computer-generated family tree, and the detailed explanation of how investigators traced the biological material to him left the courtroom in stunned silence. It was an airtight case. Michael had been connected to the crime in ways that even he could not have anticipated when he committed the murder. When the prosecution rested, it was David Cooper's turn to speak. He addressed the jury directly, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "For 15 years we all searched for Sarah," he said, his gaze locking on the jurors. "Her absence left a hole in our lives, in our community, and in the hearts of everyone she touched. Michael Patterson betrayed not just her, but all of us. And today we ask for justice for her family, and for the animals she loved so deeply." Michael's attorney attempted to argue that his client's actions were a result of extreme desperation, the pressures of gambling addiction, and the fear of financial ruin. But every point was systematically dismantled by the prosecution. 15 years of calculated deception, insurance fraud, and continued operation of the clinic under Sarah's name proved that Michael Patterson's crime was premeditated and deliberate. His attorney's arguments fell flat against the weight of evidence, and the jury could see the pattern clearly. Throughout the trial, the community of Riverside followed every update closely. Local news stations covered the proceedings daily, and the town's small coffee shops and grocery stores buzzed with whispered conversations about the betrayal they could scarcely comprehend. How could someone so trusted have lived among them, caring for their pets, while hiding the remains of the woman who had built their beloved clinic? The horror was almost incomprehensible. On the final day of the trial, the jury deliberated for 3 long days. Outside, townspeople, family, and friends waited anxiously for the verdict. 15 years of uncertainty, grief, and betrayal had led to this moment. When the jury finally returned, the courtroom was packed to capacity. The foreperson stood, holding the decision, and spoke the words everyone had been waiting for. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Patterson, guilty of first-degree murder." A collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Margaret Williams, trembling, held David Cooper's hand tightly. Her eyes welled with tears, a mixture of sorrow for her daughter and relief that justice had finally been served. "He built his life on my daughter's death," she said, speaking softly to the press afterward. "Every single day he lied to us. He deserves every day of his punishment." The sentencing hearing was scheduled immediately. Judge Robert Langley addressed Michael Patterson with stern authority. "Michael Patterson, your actions have caused immeasurable pain and betrayal. For 15 years, you lived among those who trusted you, while hiding the body of Dr. Sarah Williams. Your premeditated actions and calculated deceit have left a lasting scar on this community." Michael stood quietly, eyes downcast, and nodded slowly. "I deserve this sentence," he said, his voice barely audible. "Sarah didn't deserve what I did. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. I will live with this for the rest of my life." Judge Langley pronounced the sentence: life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Michael Patterson, now 53, would have to apply for parole at age 78 if he survived to that age, a parole that, given the nature of his crime, was unlikely to be granted. Mountain View Animal Clinic was officially renamed Dr. Sarah Williams Memorial Animal Clinic. A bronze plaque was installed in the main lobby. Dr. Sarah Williams, 1975-2009, dedicated veterinarian who served animals and her community with compassion, never forgotten. All funds that Michael Patterson had acquired through insurance, and the clinic were seized and donated to animal welfare charities, ensuring that Sarah's legacy would continue to benefit the very beings she loved. Detective Sarah Chen reflected on the case in a televised interview. Sometimes, the people we trust the most can betray us in unimaginable ways, but science, persistence, and dedication ensure that the truth can never stay hidden forever. Sarah Williams's story is a testament to the resilience of justice, even after 15 years. The town of Riverside slowly began to heal. Animals continued to receive care at the clinic. Volunteers participated in community events in Sarah's memory, and the family and friends she had touched found ways to honor her life. Each rescued dog, treated cat, and grateful pet owner became a living tribute to the veterinarian who had given everything for her community. Though Michael Patterson would spend the rest of his life in prison, haunted by the knowledge of his actions, Sarah Williams's legacy endured. Her dedication, compassion, and love for animals inspired a new generation of veterinarians, ensuring that her life's work would continue to make a difference long after her death. The story of betrayal, deception, and eventual justice serves as a reminder to Riverside and beyond. Truth may be hidden for years, but it will always emerge, and those who commit unimaginable crimes will ultimately face the consequences. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below with your thoughts. Share where you're watching from and which case you'd like us to cover next. Sarah Williams's memory deserves to be remembered, and through sharing her story, her legacy continues to live on.